And kill one, then kill one. And kill one, then kill one. And kill one, then kill one.
The true effects of film that it can have on you is impacting that symbolic world that you inhabit.
Well, I'm really glad you brought up the word true because or truth, because it feels like the traditional critique of ideology is one in which if we can strip back fiction and illusion enough, we will be exposed to the capital T truth, right? To what's really going on, which I think is the dichotomy between the red and the blue pill. And this third pill is actually understanding, why truth is always structured as a fiction originally, right? Is that third pill is that the notion of stripping back illusion to get to truth is to only understand that the truth that we get to is always already structured as another illusion, as a more original illusion. And this is so film on some level allows us to engage with the real or the quilting point behind any truth claim that operates within any ideological system, right? And film is this. So why film? I mean, why not film? Film, but really, I remember thinking when we wanted to prepare for this episode, I was like, oh right, maybe we should ask even why Zizek has such I think he privileges film, right? I think anyone who reads his books learns that film is a privileged medium, and I think, Peter, you're right in saying that it's privileged in its access to ideology as such. Mm-hmm. It allows us to critique ideology as such, because it is the reality in illusion, right?
Yeah. The third pill is dialectical materialism, folks. But we can save that for the end.
It's a jagged pill too, as well.
That's what Alanis Morissette was also talking about.
Yeah, I'm fucking Skippy. Yeah.
Which I actually revisited that.
Hand in my pocket, and the other one is watching.
I never listened to that album before, and I checked it out recently. Man, it fucking slams. It slaps. It bangs. It's great. It's a good album.
What do you mean that Alanis Morissette is talking about dialectical materialism?
Her album is called Jagged Little Pill, which is what.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if swallowing a jagged pill is actually like a phrase or an expression, but I get it purely from Alanis. So shout out to her.
It's like
okay. What were we talking about in terms of dialectical material?
I think we're now onto the discussions to the relationship between film and ideology, because that's
right. And I just want to actually, if I can just jump on that for a second, I think that the idea that films function ideologically is not a new concept to anyone. And to me, a great example of that is the very typical kinds of critiques you might see in the media these days about films as being, the Joker is an incel movie, or this movie is misogynistic, or one of my more favorite examples is the involvement of the actual CIA in the production of many American films. Films or TV shows like Jack Ryan and the many CIA films that came out when we were younger are very obviously functions of the ideological hegemony of the CIA in the United States that are quite literally bankrolled by them and by the military. But this is not the type of ideology that Zizek is talking about in films.
Yeah, I mean, there's the classic example from They Live. I'm sure everyone, that might have been, most people's first encounter with Zizek talking about ideology, where, the scene where the two men, John Nada is fighting with his construction worker friend about putting on the critique of ideology glasses, and then John Nada says either put these on or you're going to eat from that trash can. And then suddenly Zizek pops out. He's like, we're all eating from the trash can all the time, trash can of ideology. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the approach to ideology that film gives us, it's not merely that films are ideological, and it's not that films necessarily are intentionally so, right? The whole thing with Zizek and directors, it's not like Hitchcock was a Lacanian Marxist psychoanalysis, critique of ideology guy, but rather we can take something out of Hitchcock, which is nonetheless already there, but there's something expressed that isn't about intent because the critique is not trying to like read motivation or like subtle tendencies in certain directors or films,
Yeah. There's a quote from what I discern to be Matt's thesis in this book, which might be arguable, but right at the beginning he says, film theory must focus on theorizing ideology by way of film criticism. And then to quote the book directly, he says, Zizek's relevance to film studies comes by way of his rethinking of the project of theory and the role of film studies within this project. And I think what we ideally will get to by the end of this conversation is what is emphasized by Matt at the end of the book, is the emphasis on theory.
The best expression that I came across was his chapter called Class Struggle in Film Studies, and he's talking about the dynamic between theory as it's expressed in like 70s, 80s Lacanian type approach, and post theory, which is can be seen as a kind of outcrop of like the post-structural, postmodern approach to film, and he expresses the dynamic between theory as it arises via the Marxist critique and post theory through the postmodern critique, and says that this interaction is class struggle, and that the type of analysis of film is an expression of that, and that we can understand the dynamic here to be manifestations in the same way that we've talked about in terms of like political manifestations of the rift in terms of like the dynamic of class struggle. So he has a quote from Louis Althusser here at the beginning of the chapter. It says, "The class struggle has not only an economic form and a political form, but also a theoretical form. Or if you prefer, the same class struggle exists and must therefore be fought out by the proletariat in the economic field, in the political field, and in the theoretical field. When it is fought out in the theoretical field, the concentrated class struggle is called philosophy. Philosophy is, in the last instance, class struggle in the field of theory," which I think is a fantastic description of like broadly what Zizek is doing.
Yeah.
In terms of like our discussions generally about theory and like what are you doing when you're reading and thinking about and writing and interacting with theory? Is it political? Is it merely a distraction, or is there somehow kind of concrete or political concern going on there?
Right. Well, he goes on to say that, this is quoting Matt, that theory is precisely that which makes possible symbolic intervention into the realm of the real. As Fabio Viggi points out, a political act, which I guess is somewhat in line with what you were just saying. Although I think that the role of psychoanalysis would inflect quite differently what Zizek is doing with critiquing film than what Althusser might do if he did.
Well, that's true, but I will counter with a quote. This is Matthew. I should point out, though, that the terms of the debate between theory and post-theory center on psychoanalysis and film studies rather than the Marxian critique of ideology. As in the question of psychoanalysis is the kind of crucial crux of the class dynamic here between theory and post-theory. However, Matthew continues here, I interpret the focus on psychoanalysis as one that speaks more generally to the critique of ideology. As I argue further down, psychoanalysis operates within the Marxian critique of ideology, especially for Zizek, as a version of dialectical materialism appropriate to the era of postmodernity. So, like, the question of psychoanalysis here is the Marxian critique of ideology for Zizek. Not that we can reduce Zizek's approach as the Marxist approach, but psychoanalysis is being used for Zizek not only as a method of the critique of ideology, but also for Matthew here, the kind of crucial concern of class struggle in film theory.
Interesting.
Which I think is extremely interesting.
Yeah.
But there's also this role of desire in film, right? So I wonder how that fits into the ideology critique. What do you think?
so on and so on. And so on and so on. And so on and so on.